And we are live. The button is hit. That means it's Friday, and that means you are with Bryan Armentrout and the esteemed Joe Laino for Food Safety Chat Live. Poor Joe, I always give him crap.
Here it goes. It's coming.
Good morning, everybody. It's Friday. You made it through the week. Congratulations. And we're so happy to have you here. This is the Food Safety Chat. And every Friday at this time, 8 a.m. Mountain Time, where I am at in lovely Loveland, Colorado, and 10 a.m. where I don't know. Joe's in a undisclosed East Coast Carolina location for his own
location. He's in the underground bunker.
In the bunker. And we are so happy that you're joining us here this morning. One of the things that you'll notice here, other than us being goofy, and as my grandmother would say, full of beans here this morning, is this is a conversation around all things food safety. And what you'll notice with this is not a presentation. This is not a webinar or things like that. This is meant to be a chat. And part of this is we bring on expertise and people that you can ask questions directly to. Because one of the things in quality, right, sometimes you feel isolated. And part of this is to remind you that we're all in this together. And food safety is a responsibility that cuts across companies and industries, because if one of us has a recall, we all feel the impact of that. And one of the awesome things with this, and if you're new to this, what you'll notice is we're building an amazing community here. So one of our rituals here in the morning, one of two, and I always forget the second one, is let us know where you're at in the world. So we got Yorkshire, UK, beautiful area of the world right there. My assistant, the esteemed Renee, is on board helping out and giving links and helping to facilitate questions. He is awesome. Good morning, Ryan. I always remember my first Kia manager telling us they love to use the bathroom before our opening meeting. They get a first big impression on that. Don, good seeing you, my friend. Austin here in the Denver area. If you haven't had a chance to look at some of the food safety chats I've had with Austin and what he's doing in training with Sage Media, wow, just amazing work. So Austin, good to have you here. Frank in Missouri, Jill here, of course. Jill, good to see you, my friend. Don, saw some of your great comments on LinkedIn this week as well, too, Don. Thank you very much. Kevin, a couple of Kevins, Kevin Barry and Kevin Colm in Buffalo, New York. Kevin, I used to live in Williamsville. I ran quality for Lactalis American Group North America, so lived in that area of the country. Great to see everybody this morning. So this is a fun one that we're going to be doing here with Joe, and we'll do some introductions here first for people who are not familiar with Joe, which I kind of find hard to believe, but we're going to do this anyway. So Joe works for Comprehensive Food Safety, where he is the Worldwide Executive Senior Vice President of Compliance and Consulting. Wow. So if his boss doesn't give him a raise with this new title I've given him, I don't know what will. Right, that's worth at least 50 cents an hour right there, easily. So part of this is part of the ritual and the routine of this, of what we do with this, is we have a kind of a pre-call where we get together, and of course Joe's a veteran with this, and we decide on what's a great topic to go over. And one of the things that I've always done, sitting in the chair of quality manager and running quality companies, is really understanding the perspective of the auditor, right? And it's a difficult thing. And as many of you may know, I used to run consulting, training, auditing, and certification for Eurofins North America. And auditors are people, right? And they have different perspectives and different ways of approaching things. The checklist of questions under SQF and things that the auditors may need to work through is consistent, but auditors are people, right? Which is why when you have an audit, it also goes back for technical review and all those internal things that happen in the auditing process. And part of being a good auditor, and Joe's one of the best out there, is being able to be impartial and set these things up and be a objective reviewer of what the standard says and how you execute against that. Now, because auditors are people, right, they bring with them experience and a wealth of knowledge and things like that. So they have to temper sometimes their approach to things, because they do not want to get into consulting, right? That's a big no-no. Auditors are there to say, do you meet the standard or not? That's it. They're not there to say, here's how you should do it, right? That's consulting. So a lot of that gets confused sometimes. So I at least wanted to kind of touch on that a little bit. But part of what we have here is a golden opportunity with Joe. And we set this up with somebody, a topic that I think affects everybody. That's good manufacturing practices. And this is your opportunity. And with Renee here kind of helping to guide the show, we wanted to get in, what questions do you want to ask him? So when Joe is in your plant, and he is doing an audit, what would you like to ask him that you normally couldn't ask? Because this is your golden opportunity.
What time is your return flight? That's what they always ask.
Exactly. What time are you leaving? But before we get into this, everybody, please join us for our ritual drink together here, right? Kind of the thing that binds us all together. So I'm waiting for Joe. There we go. All right.
There we go. Thank you.
So CFS, best of the best. Thank you, Ryan. I'm sure that Joe appreciates that. And the check is in the mail.
Absolutely.
Yes. So good manufacturing practices, right? One of the things that we always see is if a company gets a 483 and we're reviewing these, right? The notice comes out and they may have a recall and things like this. Inevitably, good manufacturing practices are noticed and cited in almost every situation, Joe, for that failure, right? So in a lot of ways, GMPs is the blocking and tackling of good practices, right? They call it good manufacturing practices for a reason. I mean, one of the things, I think maybe this is maybe a little bit of context here as well as I'm kind of forming my thoughts around this, is a good thing to look at here is FDA always looks at their plant visits in one of two categories. There's a routine visit, right, where they're just going to check up, right? They should be seeing you every couple of years or so. Of course, COVID kind of messed that all up. And then there's for cause, right? And if they're coming in for cause, they have illness complaints or a particular reason why they're coming to your facility for an investigation. So the basic audit, right, that's when they're really looking at your blocking and tackling around GMPs and these type of things, right? They're not going to get into depth in your programs. FDA, first and foremost, I think that's kind of the lesson to pull away from this, Joe, is that FDA wants to make sure you're doing the basic things correct, because if you're not doing those right, you're probably not doing the other things right either.
Yeah, I agree. And it's what when we go into a facility, it sounds so basic to say that we evaluate GMPs. And if you think about your GMPs, they really drive all of the prerequisite programs. Mm-hmm. We talk about, and we've had chats about this on previous Fridays about the levels of food safety culture. And all of a sudden now it's an auditable thing in our world where you should have had levels of food safety culture forever. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of things going on right now in the news, and they're all over LinkedIn and they're all over the FDA alerts that are coming out. And so many of them can be tied back to that root cause of just sloppy practices.
Yeah.
We look at things like who's responsible for your GMPs, and you know what? When I go into a facility, I don't, the whole employee interview thing, and I've mentioned this in the past. I don't ask anybody, hey, what does SQF stand for? Who cares? I don't care. I don't care that you don't know what SQF stands for. What I care about is, do you understand the basics of food safety? What kind of training do you get when you come on board here? Is it here, go read this manual and here's a 5-question test at the end and we'll see what you know. I watch people. I am a big people watcher. I watch people when they don't even know that they're being watched, and people doing things as a routine is a good indicator of their level of training, of understanding, of caring. I just was at a facility 2 weeks ago, and I was looking across the room, and a gentleman had a pair of gloves on. He bent. Now, he didn't even see me. He didn't even know I was in the room. And maybe he knew I was in the building. I don't know. But he had to be 30, 40 yards away. And he bent down and he picked something up off the floor. And as he was coming up, he peeled his gloves off, went right to the hand wash sink, washed his hands, put fresh gloves on. And I turned to my entourage and I'm like, you should buy him lunch or something, because he just did exactly what he should be doing. So it's all about routine. It's all about people caring about what's going on.
And really, I mean, as an auditor, and I do this myself, right? It starts outside the plant, because a lot of times when I'm visiting a plant that I am auditing or deciding if I want them as a supplier or things like this, right? I'm in the rental car, right, and I'll drive around the facility, right? I'll just take a nice big loop around outside. So I'm looking for, biosecurity things as well too. Our doors propped open, and there are a bunch of cigarette butts sitting around outside of a door. Are people just kind of hanging around? Do they have, what type of security do they have? Also, just the general cleanliness outside too, right? Because if they're not taking care of the outside of the plant, they're probably not taking care of the inside of the plant.
Absolutely.
And your evaluation starts before you even meet Joe, right? Before he even walks in the door, he's already formulating ideas around what it is. And he also, if this is a repeat visit, right? So if Joe is part of the audit cycle of visiting your facility, right? He already has some things that he's going to be following up on. So number one, right, when you walk in, and I always look for this, is how am I greeted? Who is meeting me? How is that handled? What type of paperwork do they want me to sign? Is there any paperwork they want me to sign?
Right. I don't, and you touched on a good point, about the outside. And I always tell my clients, my consulting clients, I always say to them, look, the audit starts for the auditor. It starts when they hit your parking lot. The minute they pull in the parking lot. And I don't get too bunged up about our email correspondence prior to the audit, because some people are just a very few words, and that's fine. I don't care about that. If I pull into your parking lot and your parking lot's a disaster,
yeah,
it's a good indicator about what I'm ready to walk into. You mentioned about driving around the outside. I'm going to be in Texas next week. It's going to be 111 degrees, and I'm going to be visiting a 1 million square foot facility. I'm not about to walk around the outside. What am I going to do? I'm going to hop in my car and I'm going to drive around the outside in air conditioning. I can see just as much from my car as I can from the ground. But you have to, it sets the tone.
Yep, absolutely. And I mean, that's a golden opportunity too, right? So as you're kind of doing that initial survey outside, let's say that you come across a group of employees sitting outside at picnic tables under some umbrellas, right? Yeah. Hey guys, how you doing this morning, right? You can start talking with those guys right away. And there's nothing stopping. Hey, how's the production day going? Oh man, we're having all kinds of problems. I can't believe it. Line 2 is down, and so-and-so SOB supervisor, right? Oh, okay, great.
People love to talk.
Oh yeah. One of the things I learned early on in the dairy industry is that if you want to get the scuttlebutt about what's going on at other dairy plants in your area, talk to the drivers of the milk trucks, right? Because they're delivering to your plant, but they're also delivering to other plants too, right? So you can learn a ton from drivers. So you walk in the door, and that initial presentation of how GMPs are handled is a critical step. And I think a lot of times, Joe, it's overlooked by companies, right? They just viewed it, oh, the auditor's here. All right, take them to the conference room, right? Golden opportunity missed.
One of the things that we always try to impress upon people is, when you're at home and you're cooking for your family, okay, you do things because you don't want, or you're having friends over for a barbecue, or you do things to, like, you don't use the same tongs to handle the chicken on the grill that you use to handle the steak on the grill. You use, because of it's okay at home, but we don't follow those practices when we're commercially producing food that are feeding millions, right? So a lot of the GMPs, and we've got a punch list here, is all about what your mama taught you. You don't sneeze all over. You wash your hands after the bathroom, and this is all stuff that we go, oh yeah, we know, but yet we're not executing it. And one of the frequent flyer observations that we continue to see are hair complaints and people not washing I was just in a restaurant and a while back, and I'm in the men's room, and the chef goes in there and he does what you do in a restroom, and he just walks out. I'm like, God. Now, fortunately, I already got my food, so what, okay. But like, what about the person who ordered after me? So it's all just about caring, and it's about understanding what you're doing.
And on the restaurant topic, and that's a great one, right? Is I love it when I go to restaurants where the kitchen is open, right? And you know, they're showing the chefs off in the back, right? There's flames coming up off the grill, and you can see them chopping stuff back there, and the where they plate the food, it's all visible, right? That tells me that place, you know, they care about food prep and they want to show off what they're doing, right? Versus the place where you go to eat, right? You got the old stainless steel swinging door with the little window in it so they don't hit each other.
Right.
And it kind of cracks open. You look in the back and you're kind of like, what did I just see back? Yeah. And man, your impression, I think, is the best word that I'm looking for, goes way, way down, right? They may be doing everything perfectly, but that impression is so important. And I think that's why, and it's a good way to kind of bring it back to what we were talking about. That first impression for that auditor or anyone visiting your plant is so critical.
Right.
You know, teaching them and training them.
And I said I have a unique advantage, okay, and that is that not only have I been auditing forever, but I'm a consultant as well, okay, mm-hmm. And it gives me, I think anybody who audits and consults should agree with this. It gives you a much better perspective because you see things as an auditor should see them. And then you see things as the consultant where you know how to guide people. Okay. One of the big things, I don't care when I walk into a lobby that my name's on the board and there's banners and balloons and they got farm animals outside. Well, I don't care about, well, not about farm animals, but I don't care. Nor do I care that I get a heartfelt greeting by the receptionist. Mm-hmm. It goes, we all shop with our eyes. And we've had this discussion 100 times. We shop with our eyes, and optics are everything, right? You can dazzle them with brilliance. And if you can't, what do? You baffle them with the BS. Right. We don't want to do that. We want to be able to dazzle our auditors and regulatory with our brilliance. And that starts with a clean parking lot, a clean lobby, because we shop with our eyes. It's just inevitable. It's inevitable.
Yeah, absolutely. And because auditors are people, right? You come in, especially for a new facility, you're coming in essentially saying, okay, you need to prove to me that you're doing a good job, because I'm going to assume at this point that you're not.
Right.
And FDA definitely does that. Mm-hmm. And so with everything that you show the auditor that you are doing what you say you're doing, that you're walking the talk, and that everything that you're doing is true and not BS, the more that confidence ladder ratchets up, right? So if you're doing a great job of answering the auditor's question and showing evidence of your processes and all these type of things, as you go through the audit, things change, right? Because now the auditor has a level of comfort with you, and they'll, okay, well, are you doing this? Yes, absolutely. Let me show you the procedure. Would you like to see some of the forms? Yeah, you know what? Just, I think 1 or 2 forms on that's going to satisfy me. Versus if it goes the other direction, right?
Absolutely.
So if the auditor gets even the slightest whiff that everything that you're telling him is BS, oh, now it's like, yeah, I want to see this procedure. I want to see the last 2 revisions. I want to see 10 examples, and I'm going to be pulling the examples from your record database, not you, right? Oh, and by the way, I want to go out and do some employee interviews. That confidence level goes way, way down. And so for me, one of the things with my plants in the production side of things is the GMPs, right? Because it's that basic thing, that's something the auditor is going to be checking out constantly, right? During his visit, directly or indirectly, right? It all links together. And one of the things I'm kind of curious to get your take on this. So one of the things that I would teach my quality managers, and this was an indirect way of kicking them in the butt, is I want you, when you're doing your opening meetings and you're training the people who are visiting, I want you to go through the procedures, right? Hey, you need to wear gloves, you need to wash your hands. Anybody got any jewelry on? The normal things that you do, and walking them through that always, if it's somebody new. And I would tell them to end it like this, and this is where the rubber would hit the road, because you have to implement this. Is, oh, by the way, Joe, thank you for visiting our plant, and here's our GMPs, et cetera, et cetera. Everyone in this plant is empowered to enforce GMPs. And if you're doing something on the floor that is incorrect, people can tell you. If you're doing something egregious, they can ask you to leave.
Absolutely.
Right?
I'm sitting here, I'm reading the comments, and I'm giggling to myself, because Julie wrote, the chef that didn't wash his hands, he didn't wash his hands before you made your and I'm like, you know what? I don't want to even think that, but she's probably 200% correct. So there goes lunch. But Jeff raises a good point too about bathrooms, lunchrooms, locker rooms, break rooms. That's an indicator of how much they care.
Yeah, we've talked about in the past the maintenance shop.
Absolutely.
Yeah, there's metal shavings all over the place. Mm-hmm.
So we can say that the GMPs are the stepping stones. We know all this. I mean, there's nothing here that should be a revolutionary concept to any of us on this call. They are the stepping stones, the building blocks of everything that we do. If you can't manage your prerequisites, boy, you're going to have a hard time doing anything else.
Exactly. So one of the things with FSMA that FDA had the opportunity to is to rewrite the GMPs, right? The GMPs have been the same forever. And they rewrote it. Why? I'm curious, get your take on this, Joe. Why do you think that is? Why did FDA take that opportunity to rewrite them?
Well, I mean, if you think about the GMPs came out in 1938 with the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, and then they went through a little bit of a review in the 50s, and then another little review in the 70s. HACCP came along in the late 50s. Nobody paid attention to it until the 80s. This is just my opinion, okay? But what I think drove FDA to completely revamp the way we look at things is in part, and I'm not saying it's the whole thing, but in part, the PCA scandal, because we can credit that to be the birth of FSMA. And again, there were many, many other things that drove all of this, but if you look at one or two single incidents that pushed it, I think we can look at the Peanut Corporation situation as a driving force to get FDA to say, you know what, it's been 20, 30 years since we've revisited the GMPs and put in things about preventive control. HACCP has always been, here's our critical limits. This is what we're going to do if we exceed them. And now with preventive controls, there are our same critical limits, and how do we prevent ourselves from exceeding it? So I think all of the high profile food-borne illnesses in the 90s leading into the PCA situation, I think is in part, and probably a good part, of what pushed FDA towards modernizing.
I totally agree 100%. I think it was a good opportunity for them as well to kind of emphasize things that have been bugging them, right? So allergens, right? When it was written originally, allergens wasn't a concern, right? No, I guess, back then, if you had allergens, you ate something and you died, right? And everybody's like, oh, that's a bummer. All right. What do we do now? And you kind of move on, right? And so they took that opportunity, right? It was a golden point in time for them to look at this. So I agree on that side. And everybody, please, ask Joe these questions, because this is a great opportunity to get his perspective. Because one of the things too is, I'll start off here with a question that I have, which is, so as you're auditing and you're entering a plant, what's the typical routine you get relative to GMPs as an auditor? What do you normally see?
So when you first arrive, everybody gives you that obligatory, here's our GMP policy, and it's always the same: no hair nets, you don't enter, no jewelry, no cussing, spitting, sneezing. We are usually given some type of a hair covering. I've got a head the size of like a satellite, so I need like a really big hairnet to cover my. I have a big. My family always makes fun of it. I have a big head. Tell them it's full of brains. They don't believe it. So we then go over the plant GMPs, and in some like high risk, high care operations, obviously you're going to have more in depth as far as doffing and donning your PPE, where that's done. If you have a high risk and a low risk side of the facility, where do you don and doff? Boot sanitizing, change your shoes into boots that don't leave the facility or don't leave that high care area. So it's going to vary if you're in a low risk process versus a high risk, high care process. But usually all that should be addressed in the conference room
Mm-hmm.
before we head out to the. I got the time for me to learn about where I need to wash my hands or put my lab coat on isn't when I've already crossed the line where I shouldn't be.
Exactly.
You know?
Well, so you brought up a couple of interesting points there. So when they're showing you and kind of teaching you the GMPs, do they run you through a presentation, or is it generally a verbal of, hey, Joe, here's the things that we kind of do?
It's like a 50-50 thing. Verbal is fine to me, as long as if you can explain it to me, chances are you can explain it to your employees.
Yeah.
Because your employees are a lot smarter than me. So if I can figure it out, I'm reasonably hopeful they can figure it out.
That's a really good subtle point there that Joe just made. So if that GMP training rolls off the tongue of the quality manager, like he's been doing it every day, versus, oh, hey, we got some GMPs and stuff. Yeah, where are those forms at? Oh yeah, over here. Yeah. So you know GMPs and all that. Yeah, where are your hairnet thing?
Yep.
Right. That's telling the auditor some very important information right there.
And again, that goes back to optics, right? And it's just as I tell my consulting clients, and when I'm on an audit, if I say to you, let me see your food safety policy, you go, here it is. Okay. Or if I say, let me see, and you're like, it was here a minute ago. Where is it? No, this isn't it. It's just, it looks bad. Okay. Yeah. So it goes to organization. It goes to training. We had a chat a few weeks ago about preventative maintenance, and I said it PM is the single biggest important part of your GMPs. I will say training is probably number 2.
Yep. Okay. So yeah, no, go ahead. I'm sorry, please.
Okay.
So part of this is something that I would always teach my quality managers is the documentation is great, but you need to be able to tell your story, right? Hey, Joe, welcome to our plant. Super glad that you're here. My name is Brian. I'm the quality manager here at the plant. Been here about 5 years now. This is a wonderful facility. I know you're really going to enjoy it. Let's go some of the information that you need to know before you go into our plant. We're making a ready-to-eat product, so we're higher risk, right? We pay very, very close attention to GMP. We're going to go through the normal routine that you see. We're going to make sure that you don't have any jewelry on. We have company-issued shoe covers that you're going to need to put on, a lab coat that you need to wear when you're in all the different areas of the plant. Those will be available when we go through the door, right? What am I doing as I'm going through this, right? I am demonstrating knowledge, right? I'm just not handing you a piece of paper and saying, yeah, here's our stuff. We do this and sign at the bottom. So the analogy that I use in these type of situations, Joe, is plant tours, right? Some people are amazing at plant tours, and those are the people that get stuck with doing them, right? Because they go through and they explain the plant and they go through the history of why this is the way it is and products they've made over the years and why everything is so wonderful. And it's entertaining in a lot of ways too. If you're in a dairy plant that's highly sensitive, they'll say things like this. Okay, guys, normally this is how our process works. So raw milk, processing, pasteurization, yada, yada. We're not going to go that way because that's our highest risk area, right? We have trailers that are coming from farms, bringing that lovely milk directly to our plant. Right. We're going to go backwards through the process. So we end up with the dirty area at the end. And as you have questions along the way, I think you'll see how all these things play in, right? That's telling the story. Mm-hmm. And that brings an incredible level of confidence, right? So picking the right people to do that is also very important, right? I was a terrible tour guide, right? I'd be like, yeah, this is our processing room. We've got 4 50,000 liter tanks in this room. We can process approximately 8,000 liters an hour through this piece of equipment here. And okay. That's the data. It's not the story, right? So that's really important to be able to set up that tone correctly before the auditor even steps foot on the floor.
Absolutely. And it just goes, as you mentioned, to telling your story. And I can't stress it enough that it's all about the optics. We're human, and we can sit here and say till we're blue in the face that we're objective and we try to remain neutral. We're human. Okay. And I prove me wrong. Like, let your parking lot be a filthy, disgusting mess and the plant look like $1 million. Prove me wrong. But it's not what experience has shown. we talk about some of the things that some of the places struggle with, and it's always the simple things like hand washing, hair nets and beard covers, and maybe later we'll get to touch on in Joe's perfect world what would I like to see changed in the GMPs, but it's all about the simple things, and we can't stress enough about hand washing. I mean, and especially it's like hand washing became a big thing because of COVID. Like we never had to worry about washing our hands before until we had COVID. Oh, well, shouldn't you have been washing your hands since you were like 4 years old?
Mm-hmm.
You sneeze in your hands, probably don't shake somebody's hand right afterwards, and but we're gonna fist bump, so it's okay because there's no germs on the outside of my hands.
Oh no, absolutely not. Yeah, those knuckles are.
It's all craziness, and it's all goes back to basics. Just back to basics.
Yep. So Annie had a great question here. Thank you, Annie. So Joe, what do you think of GMP signage in the plants? I like having those reminders, including GMP gearing up processes before entrance to the plant, do's and don'ts. Right. So what are your thoughts?
Absolutely. Listen, anything that helps. Okay. Mm-hmm. Anything that helps. If you want to have balloons and streamers and you want to tow an airplane, with a banner across the plant, wash your hands. Whatever works for your facility is fine. If signage, if you think it's going to help, put it up. The problem then becomes, of course, people have to be able to. People have to be able to read. Okay, and no, because it's legitimate. It has to be in a language that they can comprehend. Mm-hmm. I was at a facility recently. They had 12 different nations represented in their facility. And it was kind of cool. They had the flags of all their employees' countries hang. It was kind of nice.
That is cool.
But there's like 9 different languages spoken there. So it can become challenging. But thank goodness for Google Translate, right? Because now everything's kind of easy to put into different languages. But I think if signage works, that's great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. So Annie kind of got me thinking about some other things too, right? So there's different ways to attack like hand washing and things like this. And so one of the things within, the last 5-10 years has been from the meat industry, right? We've seen a lot of these automated hand washers and boot washers, right? Where you stick your hands in, you got the rotating barrels and it sprays your hands, right? You got to keep them in there until it's done. Any thoughts around those?
I'm not a microbiologist by education. My basic, simple mind and understanding is it's the friction of washing, rubbing your hands together with the soap acting as a surfactant that removes the dirt. I have heard 2 schools of thought. One is those you insert your hand into the hand washer things, the jet force of the water helps remove dirt. Then I've heard argument that it doesn't work without manually rubbing your hands together. I think you could make an argument either way. And again, the people who manufactured those machines and people on the call here may know a lot more about it than I do from a scientific standpoint. I want to see some kind of mechanism where you can wash your hands.
Right. Well, and part of this too, right, is machines break down. Right. So, okay, your fancy swirly hand washer thing breaks down. Where do they go then? Right. Is there a backup sink by it? What do you do?
Right.
Part of this too is technology changes. So do you remember those circular hand wash stations with the central sprayer and you hit on the bar on the bottom, it would cascade out? One of the things that we found out in the past was open that up sometime and look inside. You wouldn't believe what's growing in there, right? So now all of a sudden this is spraying out over your hands, right? So that's why these things have been taken out of most plants. And when I go to a plant, if I see that, I make sure and tell them, it's like, you guys, you think you're solving something here, you may be making it worse.
It's a swab point for sure.
Oh, absolutely.
Just like the automatic hand dryers.
Mm-hmm.
My wife and I joined Planet Fitness, and they have them in their bathrooms. And my first thought is always, when SQF first came out, they advocated the electronic hand dryers, and they've since pulled it, right? Yeah. And now it just says that there shall be hand dryers or paper towels, because again, those hand dryers, they're very efficient and they're green, right? But they're sucking air from the room and then blowing it. If those filters on the underside aren't routinely cleaned, they can become a thing. So, you know, 100 years ago when we learned to wash our hands with soap and dry our hands with a towel, like I remember back in the day, they used to have in the men's room the continuous cloth towel that you would pull and you dry your hands and it would just pull it again and it would go to the machine, and because those were really sanitary back in the day. But soap, you know, good old fashioned hand wash, sink, and paper towels, a classic never dies.
Exactly. And part of that too, right, is, do I have hot water? Because I mean, if you got to sit there with your knee on the lever, holding the water down, and you got to wait for 30 seconds for hot water, people aren't going to wait. They're going to wash their hands in cold water.
Yep. And again, washing our hands in cold water is not the worst thing.
Yeah.
It's not the temperature of the water that cleans our hands. It's the soap and the mechanical friction. If you work in a vegetable processing facility or a meat plant where it's 35 degrees and wet, you're not going to want to wash your hands in cold water because your hands are cold to begin with. So, you know, we want to encourage the use of warm water. If you've got to wait a minute for hot water to find that sink, then maybe we need to think about a point of use hot water heater right at that location. Do things to encourage employees to want to follow the rules.
Exactly. And actually, I need to find this story because I read this I think about a year ago or so, where they did a study and they found that the temperature of the water wasn't as important as we thought. If anything, it was neutral, right, relative to that temperature.
Yep.
So that kind of flies in the face of what we've been taught in the food industry forever, right? Is you have to have water at a certain temperature, available at a certain time, and all these types of things, right? May not be true.
Yeah, and again, it's more of the soap doing its job as a surfactant to loosen the dirt, the friction of rubbing your hands together. Again,
well, and part of this too, right? And this is what Austin deals with a lot too, is behavior, right? So as people, are we going to want to stick our hands into ice cold water to wash them? To your point,
no, I don't.
Who the hell wants to do that? That's not pleasant.
Yep.
So that's when you look into that as well. So Renee had a good thing here, and we hear this quite a bit as well too, right? Is singing a song, "Happy Birthday," or things like this, right? To give you a time relative to that. Do you have a clock, you know, by your hand wash station where people can kind of, you know, watch the clock as they're washing their hands? So there's those type of things that you can do too. So Austin had a comment here. Thank you, Austin. Concerning Section 1 in BRC, you need to have a plan for the development and continual improvement of food safety and quality culture. And then he has some section there. Do you have recommendations on how to best measure and document behaviors? Yeah, so I mean, this is part of that conversation as well. So what are your thoughts around that, Joe?
Well, you know, coming from Austin, this is going to be a hard thing for me to answer, and he's the training guru.
Sure.
I don't think that you give somebody a written 5-question quiz is really measuring was our training effective. I think training effectiveness should be a visual thing. And there are some facilities that I work with. I have one client, in fact, that their training program is based around their supervisors observing employee behavior. And I'm like, wow, that's pretty different. Tell me about it. Well, we don't believe a 5-question quiz on, you know, how long do you have to wash your hands for? We all know it's 20 seconds. You sing the happy birthday song twice, or you sing the alphabet song twice. That's not effective, but we just watch our employees wash, and we watch them randomly. As I said, don't even know that they're being watched. You best measure behavior by observation.
Yep, 100%. 100%. And part of this too is making sure that you understand the rules of the game relative to the plant, right? Because the bottom line is everybody has a boss. And if I'm a line operator, I've got a boss, right? My supervisor who's responsible for that area. He's the person evaluating me. That is the person who is determining whether I'm doing good at my work or not. And part of that is GMPs. Me coming through as the quality guy and saying, "Hey, wash your hands better," right, and then walking away, it's like very little impact, right? Hey, who was that? Oh, yeah, don't worry about him, right? Now, if you get to the chain of hierarchy and responsibility to enforce those rules, that's much, much more effective.
Agreed.
So for example, if I'm in one of my plants in the past and I see a GMP behavior that I'm not too happy with, right? So hand washing that wasn't effective, or somebody who's doing the hairnet game, right? Where they keep pulling it up higher and higher on their head, to see how far away they can get away with it. Or to your point earlier, right? Somebody, isn't wearing gloves when they should be, or whatever the example, right? In the past, I would go and correct that behavior myself. Okay, right. It may work in that particular instance, but they're not going to learn that.
Right.
What I would do is I would go find the supervisor and say, hey, Joe, are you the supervisor for this area? Yep. I'm the supervisor. I've been running line 7 for 10 years. Awesome. So you manage all aspects of this line, right? Yep. I do training. I work with my team. I got the best team in this plant. Great. I got a question for you. Can you please explain to me why that young man there at the end of the line isn't wearing his hairnet right?
Yeah.
You're going to get, right? And then I walk away. What happens after I leave? That's the important part, right? Because now you are going to go to that employee and say, hey, Bill, what are you doing? That was Mucky Muck VP QA who's here in the plant doing a tour, and you're making me look bad.
Yeah.
Right. You know how to wear the hairnet. I've told you this before. Put the thing over your ears, or whatever the rule is, right? You do it again, I'm writing you up. And guess what, buddy? I'm watching you.
Right.
That's where control takes place, right? I think a lot of times in quality, right, we want to hold these things close, right? But it's a team effort, right? If we want good hand washing, if we want good hairnet compliance, if we want the rules understood, we can help, but the supervisors are the persons who make it happen.
Absolutely. A few minutes back, Ryan asked the question, how many plants have I been in where hand wash water temperature is not adequate? And I'll say this, not as many as I used to see. If I was asked that question 5-10 years ago, and I came out of school and I worked for a bit, then I had the honor of working for AIB back in the 90s when auditing was just becoming a thing. And then I came back into GFSI auditing in 2015. So my point of reference is going to be like the last 7 or 8 years. But before I came back to auditing, I was working for a company where I had 11 facilities that were reporting into me. I would venture a guess to say that half of them used to have to wait forever for hot water, or there was no hot water. And I would always go to a sink that looked like it hadn't been used in a while. Okay. There's a layer of dust in it, but it's labeled employee hand wash. And I'd step on the pedal and I'd, sing a song to myself. And if there is no set time limit for how soon the hot water has to be there, but reasonable says if it's 20 seconds, if I've sung happy birthday to myself twice and there's no hot water, chances are this sink hasn't been used in forever. But in the age now where we have point of use hot water heaters, you just plug them in right there, connected to the sink. You've got hot water in 5 seconds, and they're not very expensive. You can buy them at Home Depot, Lowe's, any of the big box places.
Exactly. Well, yeah, part of it too with those sinks too, what I look for too is, are there parts sitting in the sink? That's usually a good indicator too.
Yep.
Jeff had a question here for you. What can we learn from the recent infant formula shortage crisis about food safety culture and GMPs?
Ooh, great question. It's a sensitive subject, and to try to, and with litigation involved, so to try to remain semi-neutral about it, that the micro issues that led to all of these closures came from somewhere. Germs just don't show up on their own.
Right.
Okay. They've got to find a way into the facility. And, the thing with the current JIF situation, and we've talked about this in previous chats, There was a level of salmonella in that plant that had been there 10 years prior.
Yeah.
The germs don't, as much as we talk about germs travel, they don't just walk in by themselves. Listeria does not just magically find its way into your facility. It's transported in somehow. So was there a breakdown in the food safety culture and the GMPs? I think you could make an argument to say yes. You can make an argument to probably deny that as well. But obviously for a problem of this magnitude, and I don't know that if we'll see the infant formula problem resolve itself by the end of the year. I think we're still going to have shortages. It's going to take, it's not only is it going to take the facilities time to ramp up, but now you've got supply chain interruptions. And I find the whole supply chain thing to be fascinating. And perhaps someday that should be a future chat. Supply chain.
Yeah, definitely. But I think I was just talking about this yesterday at a client's location, and that we used to think that just in time was this amazing thing, right? Okay, we're going to make just enough inventory, we're going to ship it just in time, and it's going to sit on the store shelf and be instantly replaced. Well, we figured out
doesn't work.
That's not necessarily a good idea.
Doesn't work.
You
see it at every level. You see it in every level. You see it in automotive. You see it in aerospace. You see it in food. It's everywhere.
Right, and people act independently and have behavior. To Austin's points, right? So what did we all do during the crisis when we heard that there might be a shortage of toilet paper, right? Right? All of a sudden people have 20-year supply of toilet paper in their house, right? And I got my fair share downstairs too. Human behavior, right? Why do companies sell limited edition? Why do companies sell one of X, right? It's because there's that scarcity thing, right? As human beings, that's part of our mechanisms that goes back forever, right? Millions of years or whatever, of that scarcity thing, right? If we perceive that something is scarce, we're going to buy more than we normally do, which reinforces it, right? On the GIF thing too, I mean, part of this too, and this gets back to the behavior side of it as well, is why does magic work, right? It's because a magician is able to say, hey, watch this pen, right? Don't watch the pen. What's really happening is over here, right? See if I can do this, right? We got the pen going here, but the magic's happening here, right? And all of a sudden the flower appears and we're like, oh, that's amazing, right? Magicians are masters at manipulating our focus, right? Focus over here, not over here, right? And what happens in plants, and the purpose of this story is it's the same thing, right? We become accustomed to things. And that's why auditors are so valuable, is they have fresh eyes, right? We've all heard this a million times. They are looking at things that we walk by every day that we just accepted because that's part of human nature, right? Yeah. We're not looking at the thing that's moving, right? We're looking at what was in front of us. Yeah. And the auditor will come in and say, what's this? And we're like, yeah, that's, yeah, right? And we feel like fools because we walk by it every day, right? So there's that.
Bill, anybody here that knew Bill Pursley, and Bill just passed away, but Bill he ran AIB for years. And Bill was one of my early mentors, and Bill would always tell this story about GMPs. He says one day an acorn finds its way into the plant, okay? And it gets kicked around and people step on it, and all of a sudden it finds a crack in the floor, okay? And it gets compressed, the forklifts are driving over it and smashes it down. And then over the course of time, as you clean the floor and you run your floor scrubber on it, a little water gets in there and boop, up pops the little seedling. And now where's my finger? It's about this big, and people walk past it every day because they're just blind. They don't really pay attention. And over time, the seedling now becomes a sapling. It's like 3 feet tall. People every day just kind of walking around it. 30 years goes by, okay? And now it's a mighty oak. It's 100 feet tall. They had to cut a hole in the roof. They painted yellow lines around it. Engineering's hanging stuff off it. Sanitation's got their brooms hanging off it. And in comes the auditor. And the first thing the auditor goes is, what the hell is an oak tree? I never saw it there before. So that's where your GMPs have to be we have to look, take the blinders off, get outside eyes, and get that consultant in your facility. I got to do it at least once an episode. Get that consultant in your facility, fresh set of eyes.
Yep.
And focus on the basics. You shouldn't have an oak tree growing in the middle of your facility. That's a basic. Okay.
But it's always been there.
We've always done it this way before.
Yeah, this is just how it is, right? We got the oak tree there.
Bruce
has it. Yeah, good one here from Bruce.
Yeah.
What's your 2 cents on virtual audits?
This is just Joe Laino's opinion. This does not represent the opinion of any. I'm just getting that out there because that's the disclaimer. Okay. I don't like them. They are cumbersome. They're bulky. I like the smell, the sounds, the 3D. We'll do it on a tablet, right? And you'll be out in the plant, and I'll be, all right, turn the phone to the left. No, my left. Okay. All right, go up. All right, stop. All right, now zoom in. Oh, wait, you lost your internet. They're awful. They're just, unfortunately, I don't think they're going away. Now that we're coming out of COVID, hopefully, and it's just going to be a thing we manage like everything else in life. I can say that even during the height of COVID, I only did 4 or 5 remote audits, and some of them were that blended on-site, off-site, which is complete. I don't understand why you would do that if I'm going to get exposed to germs, whether I'm there for an hour or 2 days. But I don't believe you can replace boots on the ground when it comes to the Bruce is like, that's what I wanted, your opinion. I'm all full of opinions, Bruce, believe me. Some of them ain't great. But I just you have to have the auditor on the ground, okay? And I understand why we did it, and there's a place for it. Don't get me. I just was in an audit last week, and I can, without naming names, I did an audit last Tuesday, Wednesday, and last Thursday, Friday. Thursday afternoon, Thursday evening, I get notified by the facility I was in Tuesday that I had been exposed to somebody who tested positive for COVID. Okay. So I talked to my audit site Thursday evening. I said, sorry to bother you, but I think it's in our best interest if we do Friday remotely until I can test negative. I don't want to be the one that spreads stuff.
Yeah.
They agreed. So I stayed in the hotel. We did the document review, which is the easy part. So there is a purpose, and there is times when it's appropriate. But for the visual, laying my eyes on it, I really honestly prefer. And I'm sure if you ask any auditor, most of them will tell you, you've got to be there. You've just got to be there.
Well, to your point, Joe, you're limited, right? You're cutting off some of your senses.
Yeah.
Right? And they're only showing you, even though you try and direct it around, they're showing you what they want you to see. Right?
Agreed.
Yeah. So, and on that note as well, too, I think FDA recently announced that they're looking at and are going to increase remote audits. So that's an interesting thing, too. And this is a good segue into that's the type of information you can learn on my locals platform. So part of this, right, is continuing this discussion and this community around food safety and locals. And Renee will put the link in here for this. It's free, right? So I send out 2 or 3 times a week the latest information on recalls. I'll do little videos on the membership side on my observations and a little bit more of my opinion, right, of these type of things, and little tips and tricks, right, so that we can all get better together. So if that sounds like something that's interesting to you, we'd love to have you on locals. Again, right, the base level is free, right? It doesn't cost anything. It's a nice way to share information. And gosh, I mean, I was thinking about this too before we got on, Joe. This goes back clear to when I was, running food safety and quality assurance at one of the first companies I was at when I was, 31 years old. And I had a really good auditor, and he taught me a valuable lesson. And we're going through my HACCP plan at the plant where my team was at and all these type of things. He said, okay, this is all great, Bryan, but this is now. How are you keeping people up to date on changes? Food safety is a constantly evolving thing. How do you make sure that your different production facilities and their teams understand new risks? And I was like, oh gosh, that's a really good question. let me think about that. So I started putting together a report, and I've done it ever since. And locals is just the latest new technology to keep up to date on that. One of the things I used to teach my quality managers is you need to know more about what's going on in food safety than the auditors who are coming in your plant, right? That also helps build confidence, right? Because if you're keeping up on the things we're talking about here today, what's going on at Abbott Labs? What's going on at Jif? What can we learn from these things to help improve going down the road? That's a game-winning situation for everybody. Man, time is flying here, Joe.
Yeah, I was just thinking this there could be a part 2 to this at some point.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, I think, right, the most valuable piece of this, right, is picking your brain and getting these little nuggets of information. So you alluded to this earlier. I think this is a good way to kind of close out our conversation here today, is the magic wand question, right? So if you could wave a magic wand, and within the context of GMPs, is there anything that you would change in the regs or how they're implemented, or free reign on this? What do you think?
Somebody someday has to explain to me why we have to cover a beard but not a mustache. Somebody someday needs to explain to me why, if a person has a completely shaved head, why do they have to wear a hairnet? Somebody needs to explain to me why we don't require arm sleeves, but we require hairnets. So there's a lot of things out there that it's like, when you go to the white light, they say all the answers to your question. I'm going to spend some time there because I've got a lot. Like, what's the function of a cockroach? I don't understand why. There's a lot of questions I need answers to before I can pass on.
Well, I would say based upon that, St. Peter is going to grant you a long life, because he's going to put those questions off as long as he can.
But there's things, beyond hair covering. There's going to be things like, are we going to say at some point you need we talked about this earlier, a certain temperature of water to wash our hands? Are we going to regulate that? The GMPs don't address, talk about smoking, eating, drinking. They don't talk about GMPs, don't talk about chewing tobacco or vaping. So, there's going to be need to be updates to that. They don't talk about, what do you call them? The smoking patches.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
They're not addressed, and facilities are taking this into account in their own policies, but it's not coming from a federal level. I understand that, the GMPs cannot encompass every what if, because otherwise they'd be 1 million pages long.
Right.
But I'd like to see some realistic modifications to things that we're doing well. I think we can do them better.
Yeah. Well, and I think to your point, it needs to be outcome based, right? So if we see a particular issue that keeps coming, it needs to be addressed.
Right.
So part of this too, and you touched on an important point. Here's my 2 cents on this to close out the conversation. Is early in my career, I went down the path of trying to make GMPs extremely comprehensive, and every potential situation I could think of would be covered in the GMPs. That's a losing strategy, because it now becomes a game. Because, okay, what did he not talk about? Well, that must be okay. Right. What is the purpose of the GMPs? And let's look at jewelry or things like this. What's the purpose of that, right? It's to keep that stuff out of the product, right? So if your GMP says you can't wear necklaces, you can't wear rings, you can't wear jewelry, blah, 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 right? And then somebody says, well, what about my medical braces? Okay, yeah, all right, well, I have to let you wear that. So, okay, great. How are we going to address that, right? And you just end up in this spiral, right? If you look at it from the standpoint, your GMP says, here at our plant, we care very much about the quality of our product, and we don't want stuff falling in. Therefore, anything that falls in the product is not allowed. Examples are, right? And now you're not playing that back and forth game on these type of things. Right. So that context is really important. And the industry is super important as well. If you're working in a production facility where it's all aseptic manufacturing and it's a completely closed system, how important are GMPs, right? I've had this conversation with people relative to this, right? Hey, here's this aseptic Bosch filler, right? This entire line from batching to finished product, everything is sealed. There's absolutely no way to even come in contact with the product. Okay. Versus a plant where people are hand rolling and making products by hand and putting in ingredients and creating a burrito or whatever, right? where you are intimately involved with the product on the line, yeah, that context is super, super important, right?
Right.
I think that's where you need a good auditor such as yourself, right? To
It's like a milk. It's like a milk dairy. What until the milk is bottled, there's nothing's exposed. So
right.
do we have to have those same level? It's all and like you said, we can't regulate things to death because then nothing will get done. But I think we should tailor our GMPs for the industry we're in. If we're in high risk, high care stuff, it's going to be viewed differently than a bakery, be differently viewed than a bottling facility where everything's enclosed.
Right.
You know?
Exactly. So in closing, right, if you're in charge of food safety at a company or a production facility, wherever it is, you have responsibility for that. You can't shut your brain off, right? You just can't say, oh, well, according to 21 CFR 117 subpart, blah, blah. No, you have to think about these things. And it goes back to what I said earlier, right, which I emphasize all the time. Tell your story. Here is what we do, and here's why we do it this way. Conversely, there's other things that you're not doing. Here's why we're not doing these things, right? Very important to understand those topics. So, boy, I would love to keep talking about this for another hour, Joe. And great questions, everybody. Thank you. This as you can tell, right? This was a golden opportunity to talk with an expert, somebody who's actually going out into your plants and looking at these things and evaluating how well you do. So thank you very much, Joe, for this information.
If we want to hear a part 2, let us know, because again, there was so much here that we didn't even scratch the surface on today.
Oh, absolutely. We're here for you guys, right? And so we are here to help work together as a group. And again, like I like to say now every week, is thank you for taking the time to listen to this valuable information, right? We all get better as a group when we're doing this type of continuous improvement. So thank you for taking the time to listen to us and put up with our shenanigans. And hopefully you got some good information out of this today as well. I know I did. So every week at the same time, you can join us for the next food safety chat. So we'll be on next Friday, which, guys, it's already August coming up for the next. So at 8 a.m. Mountain Time, which is where I'm at here in Colorado, 10 a.m. Eastern, where Joe is at his undisclosed bunker location.
Underground, somewhere in South Carolina.
So we'll see everybody back here next week. And please join us on Locals as well. Love to have you. So thanks again, Joe. I love having you on.
Thank you, Bryan. Appreciate it.
Really appreciate it. Everybody, enjoy your weekend. Hope you have a great one and be safe.
Bye-bye.